Should we share our ideas with the world? Do we really need to take all the new trends on LinkedIn and YouTube with a pinch of salt? Is it too easy to publish content nowadays? Join us for another deep dive into the world where science meets business. This is Two Poles, Not So Far Apart.
My name is Jarosław Kareslak.
I'm Kamil Kramic.
I'm a professor of biostatistics at Indiana University in the United States.
I'm a supply chain expert with a focus on global transformation projects.
I primarily deal with more efficient use of data coming from medical experiments.
I'm passionate about leadership, continuous improvements, and culture in the global business landscape.
So just wanted to say that all the opinions in this podcast are our own and they do not represent the institutions that we're associated with.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, Kamil.
Good to see you.
Good seeing you again.
Yeah. I did bring a subject today.
You did?
It is actually close to my heart. It's actually one of those which I feel quite passionate about and have a bit of an opinion, and it's about sharing the data or information or whatever else we put over
share
there.
Knowledge with the world. Data,
knowledge.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Here you go. Actually, I'm not quite sure if it's always a knowledge. So I'll tell you why. In today's world, you go to any meeting, any business gathering, well, you open up your laptop or your iPad and whatever, and you find stuff. And I mean loads of stuff. And it's all about new findings, it's all about the new technology things, or, well, actually the trends in technology that will change the world, or the new way of how to motivate people, or any other thing you can think about. I think right now it's never been so easy to actually, publish, basically share your ideas with the world. And why I'm really passionate about it, because it does sometimes get to me that it should be a bit more controlled. It should be a bit more, there should be some sort of a control method to put it somewhere, especially if it has a massive reach to a massive number, to a big audience, because then it's actually followed quite a lot. So here's my thought around. If you look social media, let's talk business. If you think LinkedIn and my impression of publishing your ideas in your world, I think they're on a completely different spectrum. One is just there, and you can just do it everywhere from your phone. The other, you need to have a bit of a review and a bit of a control. And I don't know, do you have any thoughts about that?
So yeah, you were touching on the topic of expediency versus accuracy. Mm-hmm. So how fast do we share something versus how vetted it should be? Mm-hmm. And again, it's...
I know what you're going to say.
Let's say it together.
It depends.
Yes, that's right. Because sometimes it's good to get something out. And then over time, we can bring more knowledge, we can bring more information to that, and we can see, was it completely true? Was it, partially true? Now, it's one thing, it's something based on facts. Another thing, it's opinion.
Right.
Now, sometimes the kind of the difference between the two is hard to see if there is a difference, and if we see something reported versus somebody just saying, "Oh, something happened." That's what we think about it. That's what you see.
Right. Okay.
So going to your original question with just putting something out there versus having it vetted. I mean, sometimes it's good to have information like, if there's fire somewhere, I would like to know it now.
Yeah.
I don't want it vetted, it's a truly fire, or even if it's we call it false positives, or, that maybe it's not there, maybe it's false. But with that, I would rather know it now if it's not completely accurate. But if somebody tells me, think X is good for your health, I'm like, well, what kind of studies support that? What evidence do I have that, if something is not like life-threatening or something like that, I would like to have more facts associated with it, not just somebody's opinion.
Right. So again, coming back to common sense a little bit and making sure you do it. There was a cool, the example, I was looking through the examples of this. Like I said, it's close to my heart around that. And there was this case of, Wikipedia, which obviously isn't ideal, but I think we can classify as a great success in, a free access to knowledge and, checking quite a lot of, facts actually, most of the cases. So I wasn't actually aware there was a predecessor to Wikipedia, which was called Newpedia. And the only difference to that, there was this element of controlling the content. So you couldn't just come in like Wikipedia, put your facts around there, add yourself to those authors over there. There actually had to be some sort of a control process to actually publish, and it completely failed. I think it completely failed. Again, opinions and fact, I didn't dig that well into it, but it actually had to be released, that control, to get it. I'm actually arguing with myself right now around there, but that was the main step that had to be taken to actually be successful. So, yeah, I guess.
So, like you can say, Wikipedia is democratic, yes?
Yeah.
Because if more people, anybody can change it. I think now there are some controls. There is, it's not just you can say anything. You could, but somebody else would change it pretty much right away.
Right.
But I've heard about people who, especially like TV personalities or, influencers who would be like, okay, let's all change this. And if somebody changes it, change X to Y.
Yeah.
And if somebody changes that, back, let's, just this like voting being on for a change. And then it was very hard to revert it. Yes?
Right,
It would take some time. So if you would access the information in quotation marks here, it wouldn't be the right information wouldn't be there right away.
Right.
Okay, so you just have to, and this was especially true with like politicians or, somebody had something about, when it comes to science, I don't know about business. If somebody said something bad about a company, I think these days companies have it set up in such a way that you are informed about something like that. So there are like, depends on the size of the company and so on, but you can't have it there for too long because people will notice, yes?
People will notice right away. Yeah, it's actually true, but we've spoken about another thing around, saying something, and I'm getting a little bit on the detail here in the subject that I want to talk about, but sometimes it's even more costly to almost fight it. It's a bit of a different example around there. So to actually do the low, to start the whole low process and start to try to get that, the truth in court, because that's how it's sometimes used, like in social media, you actually end up with more cost for the lawyers and the actual thing, and you just agree to settle with that company. I think there's a name for it in US. There's this process. I can't remember how it's called right now, which you can't recall that.
Either. Yeah. Can't recall it. But so this is, again, we're talking about like politicians, we're talking about business. In science we have a very different process, but it also depends on the discipline. There are some disciplines where, of course, there's more opinion, interpretation, especially like in social sciences. It's not, it is or it's not.
Right.
It's more your interpretation of the facts that are out there. I still believe facts exist. In sciences, it's also different because certain things you can show to be that you have a lot of evidence for something, but somebody else might, let's say, do an experiment and say, well, it is true, but not completely true.
Okay.
So that's updated. Now, there are some disciplines, as we talked earlier about, like mathematics or physics, where there are certain truths, as long as, like in mathematics, as long as you believe or you set axioms to be something, based on that, it's not like maybe true or not.
Right.
It's either true or not. It's settled.
Right.
As we also talked a bit earlier about, but in some disciplines, especially like natural sciences, you might have we still are gaining knowledge. We're trying to understand processes that are way beyond even the realm of like quantum physics or something like that. Because with certain things we can build things, like in engineering, we can build things and we can reverse engineer, we can see how it works. Try to do it with your brain.
Right.
I mean, we're still far away from understanding really what's going on there.
So the "it depends" thing really stands out over here as well.
But again, I don't want to just use it as we can use it as our catchphrase, but I want to be more specific with that.
Mm-hmm.
That, we know these days how the cardiovascular system works, how heart works. We know actually a lot, but it's incremental knowledge. And then, this thing about not somebody, like an MD seeing this one case, one patient and saying, oh, this is how things work. This might have been just one case. Is it true in general?
Right.
So that's why we go through this multiple stages of like peer review, and to have something published in a very high impact journals actually is very hard to do it, because you really have to bring something significant to the table.
Okay.
And your data and the methods and what you assumed, like different assumptions on bias, confounding, and so on, they have to be addressed.
Okay, fair enough. Because there was one example I heard, was probably a year and a bit before on, I think it was called, I have it written down actually, it's LK99. So there was a big thing, actually in one of the big periodics around science, like Science or something like that. And they came up that there was even a photo of, we came up with this hyperconductor. So actually it was, now discovered in China and it's there. And obviously for technology world, that just brings a lot. I mean, flying trains and, things like that. So science fiction. And it actually went around the world, I have to say, probably social media wise, and it did came to me like, whoa, I actually believed in it for quite a long time. However, because it was actually in something which I always concerned as a really professional sort of a place where you put things like that. But then really quickly it came out like, well, it's not really hyperconductor, it's not really all of that things that we had there. So there's more and more of that coming our way.
So there's this big movement actually. There was a Greek person, John Ioannidis, who started that on reproducibility. Mm-hmm. So, somebody does experiment in place A, and they publish it, great, but can we reproduce this experiment? And, so place B does it.
All right.
And they're like, well, the results are not as good as in this other one. And place C will do it and say, well, we get opposite results. So this is something I talked about, science is falsifiable. So you can, just because somebody did something once, it doesn't mean that it's true in general.
Right.
So something like that, what you were saying about the superconductor, it would be important that somebody else actually tested it, has shown that, actually it works.
Yeah.
And if just one person somewhere claims something, like this was the issue with cloning, for example.
Right.
There was like sheep cloning, and actually I think it's possible. My understanding is possible to clone humans. It's just forbidden right now. But again, in order to actually show that it's possible, it's not just one place that would have to do it.
Okay. All right.
So this is maybe not even like publishing.
This
but
is more like
can somebody else actually
replicate the experiment and actually do the same thing somewhere else, so you could do it. Yeah, that makes sense. So actually, from a practical perspective, that's probably the first step to do if you hear about something. And I'm probably relating to topics which are a bit more in the latter group that you were talking about, where the facts are not so easy to, or not so tangible, let's just call it this way. It's like motivation in teams, it's like, certain elements of the behavior of a group, of how to talk to people or how to do it. There's quite a lot of content there now, which is just showing up somewhere, goes through, gets viral really in the business world, and then gets followed without, a massive, well, without even checking, for example, that's a good test, without even checking if something like that happened in a different culture, in a different, groups of people, in a different geography as well, because other things work different around there as well. So
Before we go to motivation, if I can, just maybe one more example about this reproducibility or repeatability, which are actually different concepts, but let's not go into the weeds there. But it seems these days that it's like this pendulum that's swinging. It's either kind of one way, very long way, and then the other way, very long way. Example here. This is already mentioned.
Are you designing an experiment right now? Is that
No, I'm not designing an experiment, but COVID,
Right.
it's kind of, there was a lot of misinformation.
Okay.
And I'm not taking sides here or anything, but certain things that were said to be conspiracy theories, let's say a few years ago, now they are considered as possible explanations of things. But what happened is that there's certain movement, especially on social media, where if somebody finds one thing, it's like, oh, this wasn't true. Therefore, science is not true.
Right.
So this anti-scientific movement. So when I'm saying this pendulum swinging, it's either we completely trust something, or we completely distrust something.
Fair enough.
So it's again this thinking in this binary way that it either is or it's not.
All right. Based on just a very limited number, or even the one fact
or
that
even,
happens. Yeah.
It might not be a fact even. It might be an opinion.
It might be an opinion.
And again, this is easier to show with numbers, but there was this, it's kind of funny when you see headlines. It's like majority of people in country X have been vaccinated against COVID. So, majority of people hospitalized in country X actually have been vaccinated.
Okay.
But then when you start getting into the data, you see, because of vaccinations were happening for older people, and older people have effect of COVID on them, it's kind of stronger, so they end up in the hospital, and then 60% of country was already vaccinated and so on, so it's almost like this numbers game, that yes, of course, there'll be more people vaccinated, even though the risk of getting a disease was smaller for people who are vaccinated. Again, maybe we can put a link to the
actual data,
and the analysis of it. But it's again the science versus anti-science.
Right. Okay. And then, I have to talk about it. I did talk about it in the previous one, but I have to talk it once again. AI as well, because that's for me a version of it as well. You access it. It's almost like publishing something or sharing something from. Well, right now, even in the meetings, I have often the sort of a moment when we sit down and have a conversation about something. Someone takes a phone and just put it into a specific thing and it becomes a bit of a reality. I don't put it online and everything, but it's a bit of an uncontrolled sort of information. Or is that an opinion as well? Is AI an opinion or is that fact?
Well, it's an interesting topic that it's. This goes to the prompt engineering, because I always put, when I ask, let's say, ChatGPT, don't create anything. Just base it on something that's out there.
Right.
Because, and again, this is, in a week, what I'm saying might not be true because they fixed it.
Right.
Or, in a month, it might be completely different. It's kind of even hard to talk about it at this point because it might not be relevant.
Right.
But is it knowledge? I would say there are people with cynical opinions saying that the only thing in AI that actually is true is A. There's no much I there.
Okay. Right.
So I think it's a useful tool, but with any tool, I think we have to be careful how we use it.
Okay. And do you see a similar sort of a trend in the science world around, coming back to the original question and the original opinion about just having a piece of, an opinion or a fact and putting it out there and just following there. Is the similar trend going in the science world around? It's easier to publish right now, or is it still a world of very
Well,
controlled peer reviews and things like that?
so I would say it's harder to publish in journals with a high impact
Okay.
because there are just more people who want to
Alright.
publish and so on. But it's not harder to publish in general
Right.
because of even in normally it would be peer reviewed. What it means is every manuscript that you send is reviewed by 2-3 other scientists who provide their opinions on it. Now, there are some journals, and again, I don't want to name any names here, but this process is very onerous. So
Right.
you get this opinion, but not really, and it's so that's like the second category. Then there's another category which is very easy to publish. It's called pay to publish.
Okay.
Basically, you send something somewhere, you pay them $2,000-$3,000, and it will get published.
okay.
And it's called peer reviewed, but it's not really.
Right.
So those are very easy to publish. Now, nobody really cares about such articles being published because I would say a much more common thing to do these days is to post something first on kind of sharing of manuscript on like free servers. And in my field, this would be like bioarchive or anything with archive. There's archive, bioarchive, meta-archive, and so on. So the early articles, and again, I'm going back to COVID here often, but early manuscripts on COVID were published first on like meta-archive before peer review.
Right.
But then, they were going through peer review, and some of them were published, some of them were published in so-called good journals, high-impact journals. Some of them are still on meta-archive. Nobody really published them. And it doesn't mean necessarily that they were not true or something like that, but there are those different levels of trust and different levels of data, how the data were collected, analyzed, and
But
so
you can
on.
still access them. I
You
guess
can
they're
access
still
them.
there available,
But
and you can
you
still
know-
form your views
Yes,
and things
but
based
they were
about
not peer reviewed. So
Right, okay.
but it's up to you as a consumer
Right.
to say, okay, this was not peer reviewed. Probably it's less trustworthy. I'm not
Right.
saying it's not, but it's just less on the.
Yeah. And do you think things get missed? Because I guess that's the other side of the
Yeah,
scale. Because
yeah.
the ease of sharing things, then
Yeah.
I guess you miss the value in people's thoughts if someone doesn't have the right support in getting this thing, or just doesn't have the time to do it, or there's so many things. There might be stuff. There might be a risk. There could be progress would be much faster going forward.
And this is again, we're going to expediency versus accuracy.
Right. Okay.
So faster, we're going at a pretty fast pace.
Okay.
If we talked 2 years ago and I said ChatGPT, you would be like, what?
Yeah.
And I would be like, how do I even know it? I must be coming from the future because it wasn't there yet. Yes? So this is going very fast, but what I want to say here is sometimes there is again, I'm using this word bias because it's much easier to publish positive results
Right.
than negative results,
Okay.
or like so-called null findings. That just saying, oh, we tried this, it didn't work, because nobody wants to publish it. Yes, because it's But then somebody else will do it,
Right.
and the fifth person does it, and they suddenly find, oh, maybe it works,
Right.
because they didn't even know that somebody else tried it. Yeah, so that's why this kind of not peer-reviewed, putting stuff somewhere on this archive kind of things, it's useful because at least you can see that somebody has done it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and someone else might find it and just use it
Yeah,
for something else, or it might be an element of something completely different that you just add. I think that's how the whole science works, in my mind, at least. Well,
Science works in mysterious ways.
it
and
does.
that's,
It does. That can be another one. If you find this thing, the topics in the discussion interesting, please do subscribe and push the subscribe button, because that will allow us to make many more interesting subjects into our conversation.
Yeah, we will have guests, we will have, we'll talk about other interesting topics, so let us know. What do you think?
Let us know what you think and push that button, please.